Hello, my grots and gits. Welcome back to Happy Crumpin' Wargaming. Today, the audio is going to be a little bit funny because I am traveling for Christmas. I am in my parents' home in the lovely South Carolina. So if any of you guys are playing around the area of South Carolina, give me a shout. Perhaps we can even meet up to film a live battle report, which would be sick. However, it's been far too long since I've released a video, so today is the freaking day, and I'm going to be talking about something that has been really traveling throughout the Discord, at least our Happy Crumpin' Wargaming Discord, which, by the way, you should join and become a member of so you can support the channel, and you can get significantly better at the game, and get your fix talking about hobbying every single freaking day. We actually just had a couple members who just bought a few coaching sessions for some of the other members as Christmas presents. It was actually really cool. We're having a blast in that Discord. Hop on in. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about winning conditions. Winning conditions is one of the ways that, it's literally about figuring out how the heck are you going to win the game. So what we'll do today is I'm going to identify what some specific examples of winning conditions are. I'm going to talk to you about how to identify winning conditions, and then I'm actually going to go through the generalized winning conditions against every single army in the game. This video might end up taking just a little bit of time, perhaps like a 25 or 30 minute, but settle on in because it's going to be freaking awesome. So anyway, before we get started, if you guys like this channel, hit the like button, subscribe, make sure you hop on over to my coffee link, which will be in the description down below, where you can support me with either just donations because you like what you see, or you can join the members only section of the Discord. It's $4 a month. It gets you tons and tons of constant access to really high level tactics and gameplay and tons of great conversation. And it also really supports me and make the channel. You can also get yourself some coaching because it's the new year and we're trying to hit the ground running. So go ahead and grab some coaching while you are at it. So let's start the episode right now. First off, what are winning conditions? So every single matchup that you're going to play is going to have certain struggles. There's going to be advantages and there's going to be disadvantages. So let's take the Orks versus votanns, for example. Well, votann have some inherent advantages against the Orks. However, the Orks have some inherent threats against the votann. So there are absolutely things that you're going to have to balance against each other. The process of identifying winning conditions is trying to figure out how do you win the matchup in front of you. One of the biggest issues that I see with a lot of players is that they just play the game. They don't think about, well, how am I actually going to win the game? And one thing that you'll see all the time is people will make decisions because they're like, okay, well, I'm going to move my models up here so that I can go and kill the enemy. A lot of times, though, that can be a big issue. If you don't have to kill that enemy to win, then what you inevitably end up doing is just exposing yourself, losing a important unit, and then you end up losing the game because of it. So you'll lose the game without even taking a risk that could help the game. So it is a very interesting process of identifying how you win. So certain armies are going to play very differently based off of their opponent's armies. When I am playing Orks, I play very differently against, say, Space Marines than I do against, say, Grey Knights. I play completely differently. You have to identify what you're doing in any given matchup. And these things that you do will change based off of the mission, the primary. It'll also change based off of the deployment, and it can change off of the mission rule if you're using mission rules. Speaking of mission rules, if you're not in the Discord, you really need to hop in the Discord because it's starting, I'm going to announce it, I think, middle of January, we're going to have our first ever server tournament, and it's going to be an absolute blast. So these are your freaking win conditions. I'll just give you a really quick example here of how your win condition can change based off of the mission you're playing. So let's say I am playing custodes. Well, typically when I'm playing custodes, one of the things I like to talk about is I will hold primary. I try to deny primary. But I also try to pick primaries that are together. So if it's a 3 objective primary, so 1 in the middle, 2 on the sides, pretend it's hammer and anvil in your head. One thing that I like to do with my custodes is I'll choose, say, the middle and the left primary. And those will be the primaries I hold, and I let you have the right primary. However, if I'm playing vital ground, what I'll do is I'll actually split my forces, and I'll hold the left primary, and I'll hold the right primary, because in the vital ground, there is no middle primary. However, what this does is it's really powerful because there's only 2 objectives in the middle, and there's 1 in each one's home field. So what you inevitably do is you force your opponent to be stuck on just 2 points for primary every turn. So the primary mission changing will change the way that you want to actually play the game. So let's give some examples of win conditions here. One example might be, okay, to win this game, I actually have to table my opponent. That is actually very rarely the case. Sometimes it's true, though. Another example would be I need to hold 2 out of 3 objectives, and I need to max 2 fixed secondaries. Okay. Another one is I need to turtle around my objectives, kill my enemy while I'm doing indirect, because I'm just going to be doing whatever, cleanse, deploy telehammers, whatever. But basically, the whole point of every single win condition that you're going to set is going to be score more victory points than your opponent. Now, this doesn't mean you need to score lots of victory points. One thing that people mess up all the time is they think you have to score 100 points, you have to score 90 points to do well. No, 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 no. If you're playing individuals Warhammer 40,000, all you got to do is score one more victory point than your opponent. Win more is really important in teams, but not in individuals. And most people are talking about individuals, so that's what we're talking about right now. All right, let's talk about some of these faction-specific win conditions. Let's say you're up against the Green Tide. I don't know why you would ever be up against the Green Tide. They're the most fantastic aliens in existence, and we love them more than anything. But let's say that you do want to play against the Green Tide. Well, here's what you really need to think about at the beginning of this matchup. And most of these are going to be fairly general guidelines, but they're fairly also, they might be general, but it's pretty good wisdom into figuring out what you do against individual armies. So when you're playing against Orks, you need to pop transports early. Bottom line. Basically, every single orc list out there is transport heavy because transports are orcs' greatest strength right now. There might be one or two lists that you might see that's going to be Green Tide, which is just bodies on the table, and your win conditions would be a little bit different against that style of army. But against most orcs, you have to pop transports early. You need to force them to wah early or when they don't want to wah. And then you do not advance towards them with multiple options because those are just going to be utilized as slingshots for the orcs. The only time this is really an okay exception is if you're trying to just move block in specific areas on the map. But you don't want to come towards orcs because they have to come towards you to kill you. And they are really, really good at board control. So you don't want to give them the board control. You can move block, and you need to pop those transports early for the orcs. A lot of times, me as being a primary orc player, what I actually do is I make sure that all my transports are hidden, and I very intentionally give my opponent the option to go shoot Mazrak Scragbad or shoot my Squighogs, because my opponent will inevitably move. They take the bait, they might kill half my squad of Squighogs, or maybe they even get lucky and they kill Mazrak, but when they do that, they put themselves wildly out of position, and my trucks are safe, so that then I can go and claim the board. So this is one of the things that I'm talking about when I say set your win conditions. Me as an orc player, my win conditions is that I want to control the board. So if you're trying to win against orcs, you can't let them control the board. And the best way to do that is to pop the transports early, and you want to force them to wah when they do not want to wah. Let's talk about Eldar. Eldar are a very strong army. A lot of people are saying they're maybe the second strongest army in the game right now. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but I'm pretty close to agreeing with it. I do think Chaos Space Marines is fairly clearly the best army. Eldar's awfully good, though. So how do we handle an army that has such great movement shenanigans and an army that has just crazy damage output and an army that just also doesn't die? Because, Wraithguard just continuously regenerate. The Incarn can be very challenging to kill, and Night Spinners are, you're fighting indirect. So if you don't have an indirect, you're probably just never going to kill Night Spinners. Well, here's the deal. Eldar armies are very low unit count. We're talking 10 units, 11 units. 12 when they go crazy. So when you're playing against Eldar, the way that you win is you kill the scoring units. You kill their scorers so that they're forced to do actions with things like Wraithguard and the Incarn. The second you get Wraithguard and Incarn doing actions, you've won the game. So if you know, okay, I can't handle this Wraithguard brick, I'm never going to get to those Night Spinners, and the Incarn is just a menace. If you kill all their Swooping Hawks, you kill their foot characters, and you kill their Warp Spiders, suddenly you've just won the game, because even though you can't kill the rest of the army, and that rest of the army might be killing you, they can't score points with that part of their army. So you're in a great place. So the last thing that you need to think about when you're playing against Eldar is you also need to be very specific about where units die. So one thing I do as an orc player a lot of times is I very specifically dangle a unit of Gretchen as bait for his Night Spinners. He's like, oh, I'll kill those Gretchen. It works great on Purge the Foe, where he needs to make sure that he kills a unit turn one. So I let him kill my Gretchen so that he can pop his Incarn, and a lot of times they'll just take the bait and they'll pop the Incarn down. And when they pop that Incarn down, suddenly I have tank shot, grenades, squig bombs to kill him. So you can actually bait that Incarn's movement depending on how you do things. All right, let's talk about the next list. This is the Necrons. Now, Necrons are really cool, and for the first freaking time in a long time, Necrons are actually fun to play as and play against. The Silver Tide is now a fun army, not the most boring army in existence, which is really, really cool. And you get the Hyperphase, you've got the Annihilation Call, and you've got the Canoptic Court, which is probably the strongest, but you got a bunch of different iterations. I have a few predictions about the Necron Codex, which I'm going to come out with in another video where I'm going to talk about them. But the bottom line with Necrons is you want to force them into a slug fight. You want them to stand in front of you and trade punches, because basically every army will win that fight against Necrons. There are not many straight up, let's just duke this out fights Necrons can win. Necrons are amazing at doing long, drawn-out engagements because they just keep coming back. You can't stop them. But if you can hit them with a 1-2 knockout punch, that's the way you handle Necrons. So don't try to plate damage them. You want to focus on your one-shot damage. You want to position yourself so that he is in a bind and that you're going to be able to charge or get overwhelming firepower in one activation when you're killing his units. And that is basically the key to Necrons. Dark Eldar are about to be a big problem. Mark my words, everyone. Dark Eldar are going to ruin your dreams of becoming an amazing Warhammer player because these guys are way better than people think they are. The problem with Dark Eldar is the detachment they're currently in. The second they get a codex or this balance status slate comes up, they are going to be a real big issue. All right, so essentially one of the things that you need to do with Dark Eldar is you have to watch the angles for Scourges because those things are crazy. They move 14, and then they're going to move another 6 after that. So they are exceptionally fast. These guys fold to pressure, though. A lot of times it's just a stat check where you pressure them and you corral them into a very small space, and then you can overwhelm them. Dark Eldar, if you try to play the cagey game where you're playing angles and all this and all that, a lot of times the Dark Eldar are just going to annihilate you, and you're not going to have the opportunity to get your win. So you need to make sure that you don't let them play this dancing game. You put them in a position and you force them to respond with overwhelming force in one spot. That's how you're going to beat your Dark Eldar. Tau. I found a really good picture to represent Tau. This reminded me of the periodic table of elements, which is chemistry, which is boring as hell and it sucks. So that's why I use this picture to represent Tau, because they suck. Sorry, all my Tau players. I just hate your army. I love you. I just hate your army. Anyway. The way that Tau currently are in the Index Edition is they're a really interesting match because when you're playing against Tau, the game is a race to turn 3. If you can do enough damage to hamstring those Tau by turn 3, you're going to win the game. If you don't, they're going to table you. So Tau's winning condition is essentially almost always, hey, move block until turn 3, then table my opponent. That's how they win games. So for you going against Tau, what you need to know is that you need to smash them before turn 3, because that's when they start getting their double exploding 6s on everything in the entire army. So that's, honestly, Tau is a fairly simple, fairly straightforward win condition. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it is fairly straightforward. Let's talk about the votann. It's good. I got ahead of myself there. Votann. All right. Votann have a very, very powerful army right now. Their army rule is incredible. And they will actually do a lot of damage to you as an opponent. Sorry, there's a phone going off in the background. I'll have to try to fix that in editing core. It is what it is. Anyway, so with Votann, what we do is we need to destroy the bikes. The bikes are the things that control the entire battlefield for the Votann. They're the one they get to go back into strategic reserve. They get to come back on the battlefield. They do insane amounts of damage, especially when they're firing at a target that has a grudge token on it because they get the double exploding 6s. They ignore cover with the AP1, which is really strong. Bikes are absolutely amazing. They get the 9-inch scout move. So if you kill the bikes, what you've done is you've basically eliminated the Votann's board pressure. So win conditions against Votann fairly almost always boil down to this. Kill bikes, and then you need to deny the Hearthguard Deep Strike. Because the Hearthguard, oh my gosh, are they powerful. But they only have an 18-inch gun range, which means it's very easy to outrange them. If you have 24-inch gun range in an ideal world, I know this is ideal, but just so you understand how big a deal this is, you can stand 24 inches away from a unit of Hearthguard, shoot them. When they move towards you, overwatch them. They still can't shoot you because they only move 5 inches. And then in your turn, you shoot them again. And then when they move towards you in their turn, you shoot them again on Overwatch. So you can get 4 activations before they activate 1 if you play the range correctly. Now, that particular scenario will very rarely happen, but just so I can elaborate exactly what it looks like. So the thing you have to be aware of is that these guys practically almost always deep strike simply because they are so slow. So you need to screen those deep strikes. If you screen their deep strikes, you outrange them and you get the bikes, Votann loses. That is how you beat Votann. Let's talk about the next army. This is going to be the Tyranids. Tyranids are a real popular faction, and I absolutely love them. I think they're in a great place right now in 10th edition. They're very strong, but they're not broken, and they just have a few things that you need to be aware of. When you're fighting Tyranids, you don't have to kill them. This is where everyone goes wrong. They're like, oh, well, I have to go out. I have to kill all these X-Trains. I have to kill all these Maleceptors. It's not necessarily true. What you have to do in order to beat Tyranids is you have to control primary and deny them primary. And the reason for this is you cannot stop their secondaries. One Biovore unless you're an indirect army. If you're an indirect army, okay, then you can deny their secondaries. But if you're not an indirect army, one Biovore will essentially guarantee that they're going to get back secondaries, and there's nothing you can do to stop it because it's practically impossible to screen the entire board from a single spore mine. So he's going to get deployed teleport homers, he's going to get behind enemy lines or engage or whatever. So just think of it this way. Tyranids start with max secondaries. So the way you have to win, regardless of what they have on the board, is you have to control the primary and deny primary to them. Because if you get 50 points of primary and you deny them primary and they get 40 points on secondaries, you win. That's the game against Tyranids. And there's lots of details behind that, but start with that broad stroke against Tyranids. Let's talk about genestealer cults. Genestealer cults are super tricky because they can deep strike all over the board. They come back to life. Here's the way we have to beat genestealer cults. And this is the broad picture, remember. First off, position your Overwatch to blunt the worst of the enemy's drop turn. And this needs to be a good Overwatch. I'm talking like Flamer Overwatch, 3d6 Flamer shots at least, bare minimum, or a really strong blast with rerolls Overwatch. Like a Flash Gets Overwatch would be great against these guys because they can only deep strike one unit with the 3-inch deep strike. I think with the Nexus they might be able to do it with 2, but I don't remember if Battle Tactic was removed from that stratagem. I don't have it in front of me at this moment. So that Acolyte Bomb can only come down from that 3-inch deep strike to be able to throw. So wherever that is, that's the deep strike you need to blunt. Now, the rest of their army is still going to hit you really, really hard, and there's not much you can do to stop them. Of course, you can still kind of screen positions a little bit. So the things that you really want to do is you want to do deep strike denial. So if you have the infiltrators, that 12-inch deep strike denial is very blessed against the genestealer cults because that will make it so that they can't even use that 3-inch stratagem wherever they want to go. After that, you want to make sure you kill these units. Don't leave them on 1 or 2 models because they regenerate. Now, sometimes the Acolytes won't actually have the icon, so the Acolytes won't regenerate. If that's the case, then you can let them live, but the Neophytes will always have the banners. So if you kill them down to 2 models, they're just going to regenerate their 4 seismic cannons, and then they're still going to be at basically 90% effectiveness. So you might as well kill them and just kind of hope that they don't resurrect. So that's the way that works. Deep strike denials are amazing, and then when you have units that get to go in and out of reserves or teleport, you get to destroy the blips, which is very, very powerful. So what you need to do with the genestealer cults when you're playing against them is you deny the worst of the deep strikes, whether you're using deep strike denial bubbles or if you have a great Overwatch. And then you need to make sure that you wipe the units. Don't leave them on a few models because they're going to regenerate and become horrible, horrible menaces. Chaos Knights. Chaos Knights are a big problem for a lot of armies because they are a stat check army. So the first thing about Chaos Knights is you need to understand that you're probably going to be able to max secondaries against them because they give up 20 on Bring It Down. It's just the way it is. You need to really strongly think about killing the Chaos Knights. When you kill the Chaos Knights, they lose all of their board control. But the problem here, and the reason why you have to kill Chaos Knights is because you can't hold primary against them. Their primary game is so freaking strong. What they're inevitably going to do is they're going to just toe in with 1 knight, and that's OC8. It's very challenging to OC them. So you really need to have a game plan that's more focused on killing Chaos Knights, less against like the board control and stuff like that. One of the things that's really hard against Chaos Knights is it's very challenging to move block them. So what you need to understand is that you still can move block them. You just have to get creative. If for those of you who don't understand why, is Chaos Knights have a stratagem called Nightshade. What this does is it allows their knights to move through models and they can move through buildings as if they were not there. So it effectively turns them into flying infantry. The trick is that you can still deny their ability to use this because they still cannot land on top of models or inside walls. So I have a little picture I made up on TTS for you here. We have this knight carnivore if you're just taking a look at him. And let's say he wants to charge the Gretchen. He doesn't want to charge the squig hogs because the squig hogs are going to kill him. Well, he can Nightshade to get into the Gretchen. The problem is he can't end his charge within the wall. So you still can move block him. You can still screen him even though he has this really awesome ability. So just think of it that way. So with Chaos Knights, our goal is actually just to kill the army because we can't deny them on primary and their secondary game is probably going to be already factored in. So that's Chaos Knights. Let's talk about World Eaters. World Eaters have a blitz of a turn 1. So what we really want to do is we want to screen that turn 1 charge. Super important. And then we want to force World Eaters to move into firing lanes. We can do this by move blocking with transports, by doing all sorts of things. You want to corral them into your firing lanes, and you need to screen that turn 1 charge. Otherwise, you're in a big, big trouble. Another piece of advice I have for World Eaters is you need to seriously pay attention to the pre-battle round blessings that they choose. Sometimes they'll choose Fight Undeath. Sometimes they'll choose Feel No Pain. But let's say they choose the all-out assault ones, which is going to be +2 to move and advance and charge. If they choose those, you know they're not going to have a feel no pain. So you can kind of position yourselves to really punish them with damage. So pay attention to those blessings. That's what we're going to do at World Eaters. I have an entire video specifically dedicated to how to screen that turn 1 charge, and go check it out if you haven't seen it. It's pretty awesome. Chaos Space Marines. Basically, you want to pray against Chaos Space Marines. These guys they essentially have no weaknesses. They're clearly the best army in the game. They are unbelievably cheap on a lot of units. They have unreasonably powerful stratagems, and everything just hits harder than your hardest hitting unit. So if you're playing against Chaos Space Marines, the one big thing that you have to do against them is you can activation lock them. What this means is force them to send their chosen or their cursed cultists or whatever into your transports. The second they do that, you'll be able to kill them on the swing back. But I will be very honest with you. Chaos Space Marines is typically one of those armies that it's just do the best you can against them. They're real strong right now. Thousand Suns. All right, Thousand Suns. Thousand Suns, your win conditions against Thousand Suns are a little bit different than they are on other armies. Holding primary is great, but also sometimes you don't want to hold primary against them, because the second you hold primary against them, they become way stronger against you, because they're going to be re-rolling wound rolls against things that are on objectives if they're attached to Rubric Marines, which are one of their main damage dealers. So one of the things that they do struggle with is activation locks. They do not have that many units. So if they have to use a unit to kill a transport, for example, that's a big problem, because now they might not have anything left over to kill the thing that pops out of the transport. So that's what I mean by activation locking. You need to use units to deny their powerful overwatch. If they have RMN with the unit of Rubric Marines and they're getting ready to do an amazingly brutal Flamer overwatch, well, what you might want to do is you might want to charge in a transport first, because that's going to mean, oh crap, they won't be able to overwatch you. So you have to use units and creativity to make sure that they can't use their exceptionally powerful overwatches against you. Screening's not always the biggest priority against Thousand Suns, simply because they're going to have the ability to teleport one of their units with one of their enhancements, and then they get to move again in the shooting phase before they shoot. So they're still going to get really good angles on you, basically regardless of how the deep strike is. Now, you can have multiple layers of screening to stop that deep strike and then the extra move, but it gets very challenging. And then the last little key against your Thousand Suns is you need to expect much faster movement than you're expecting. Just for an example, Magnus moves 14 inches, and he can give himself the thing that allows him to be +2 to move, so he can move like 16 inches. And then they can use their Cabal points to let him move again. So that guy by himself can move 32 inches in a turn and still shoot. Just to give you an idea of how fast they absolutely can be. So you need to respect their movement distances. Don't stand a primary in positions where they get to shoot you with their rubrics, and make sure you activation lock them. Use that to your advantage. You'll be able to handle the Thousand Suns. All right, Chaos Demons. You need to force them to charge into things that they do not care about. These guys have essentially zero shooting. So it is all about melee, baby. Sounds like an army for me, actually. But what you really need to do is you want to make sure that they have to charge units that you don't care about them charging, whether that's Kroot Hounds, whether that's transports, whether that's Gretchen. It doesn't matter, because the second they charge those units, it's like, okay, they're just sitting out in the open for you to murder in return on your turn. So that's what I recommend them. Slaughter them on swing back. This works for melee armies or shooting armies. It's all about the screening, baby. Death Guard. Death Guard is an army that you want to lock them in their deployment zone. They are slow. They are very slow. If you can lock them in their deployment zone, they just won't ever be able to get out and do secondaries or hold primary, and you'll just win even if they table you. Sometimes what I always try to do, if I can, I'll lock them in their deployment zone and I'll sacrifice my entire army so that they just can't even leave their deployment zone until turn 4, which means I win. So lock them in their deployment zone, control the board. If you pop those transports, those Plague Marines are only moving 5 inches, and that is a thing of freaking beauty. So Death Guard, you really want to think about the board control against them. That's how you win. Grey Knights, and we're finishing it up, guys. These are just the Imperial armies, and then we'll be done. Grey Knights, you have to control the deep strike ability with your screening the board. So if you guys don't know what I mean by screening, by the way, maybe I need to redo my video that I did in 9th edition on screening and move blocking. If you want to see that video, type it down in the comments below, but I'll see if I can get that one out for you guys. So Grey Knights, guys, the entire army gets to always be picked up and then deep strike again and again and again. So you need to make sure that you have your 9-inch bubbles really laid out so that you can deny where they're allowed to come down with a deep strike. Now, one unit will be able to come down within 3 inches. It's just the way it is. depending on the army that you're playing, stat checks work really well against Grey Knights because they have troubles dealing with certain armies. Take Custodes, for example. Custodes are very good into Grey Knights simply because everyone's at a 2-up armor save, and you're going to be in cover, so none of their weapons will ever be wounding you up, will ever take you beyond a 2-up armor save, essentially. That is really hard for the Grey Knights to deal with. So those Custodes just kind of walk in and say, "Come at me, bro." That's how they win Grey Knights. The big problem with Grey Knights is when you respect their damage output too much. Now, they do slap a lot in melee, and against certain armies like, call it Orks, Sisters of Battle, things like this, with that are low toughness armies, their Storm Bolter Fire can be disgusting. So don't say that they're pushovers, but a lot of times this is an army that you can, if you have the correct build, you can just kind of walk in and take it against. Sisters of Battle. The trick with Sisters of Battle, the way that you beat Sisters of Battle, is you do not plink damage them. You don't shoot a pistol to cause 1 wound to a castigator. Don't do it. It is a big mistake. Because the second you cause 1 wound to them, the unit gets much stronger on Sisters of Battle. For those of you who don't know, when Sisters of Battle are damaged, they get +1 to hit. When they're taken down to below half strength, they get +1 to wound, and they get infinitely more powerful. So the trick with Sisters of Battle is you do not strike until you're ready to overwhelm them in one fell swoop. It's kind of similar to the way we play against Necrons. You want to do a 1-2 knockout. You don't want to try to you don't want to try to just do a little Floyd Mayweather dance. Don't do the Floyd Mayweather. Go for the Iron Mike Tyson knockout. That's what you want to see. If you're an indirect army, a lot of times you'll lose the indirect battle because those exorcists are very strong with the sweet D6 damage that's coming out of them, and they have the miracle dice to guarantee the damage. So a lot of times if you're an indirect army, you'll lose the indirect battle that you're trying to play. So you'll need to grab that board control against them. The last thing I want to say about Sisters of Battle, the last thing you really need to focus on is you need to pay attention to your screens. They have these units called Seraphim that after they deep strike down and they shoot, they get to move. So if you're standing on the very edge of an objective, then they can get to deep strike down 9 inches away from you, but say 5.5 inches away from the objective. They'll shoot you and then move onto your objective and take it away from you. So be aware of their deep strike tricks. Space Marines, guys. Space Marines are an exceptionally powerful ability, and the thing that we need to identify about them is number one. The number one thing that Space Marines do is they kill what they want to kill. They get to choose one unit every single turn, and that unit will die. That is Space Marine speciality. So the first thing that you need to think about when you're playing Space Marines is how do you use activation locks to force your opponent to waste their Oath of the Moment. The things that are anathema to Space Marines is having units inside a Rhino, or having units inside of a truck, or having a lone op. If you have these things, he can't bring his full force to bear down on your army. And that is the trick against Space Marines. The other thing you need to think about is basically, I don't bother screening Space Marines at all because Inceptors have 3-inch deep strikes. The only way that you can really screen it is with a good Overwatch or with an ability like the Infiltrators or the Night Tyrant who have the 12-inch bubble of deep strike denial. Those things, okay, you can screen away. Outside of that, you really can't. Add mech. Just as an aside, guys, I know people are going to hate me for this, but I hate the add mech models. And I found this meme hilarious. You just looked at the Devastators, and people were like, "Oh, these models are awful," which I agreed, by the way. And then GW says, "Hold my beer," and comes out with the new ad mech. Whoever made this meme, I love it. It's hilarious. So shout out to you. I don't know who you are. I'm not trying to take credit. It certainly wasn't me. All right, with ad mech. Now, I haven't taken the time to really dive super deep into the new ad mech codex yet. It's something that's on my plate. I will get down to it, and I will give you guys a few full how the heck do we handle this RV when I do, but I just haven't done it yet. But for now, when you're playing AdMech, you need to think about 3 real things. First off is you need to deny the move blockers using your scouts, infiltrators, etc. If you remember my last video on how I fixed AdMech, you need to understand that they are the best move blocking army in the game. So you need to deny their ability to do that with your own scouts or infiltrators. 2, you have to watch the breachers' lanes of fire because breachers slap. Those dudes are so strong in shooting. You have to watch their lanes of fire. And then number 3, and this is the real trick here, guys. They fold when you can get into them. You can overwhelm them, but you need to watch out for their OC manipulation. I think it's the Skitarii Rangers or Vanguard. I forgot which one, but they're going to be making you -1 to your OC. So your OC is going to be a lot less than you actually think it is. So you have to be really, really careful about when are you holding primary because they're very tricky about that. So pay attention to their OC manipulation, but just overwhelm them and deny their move blockers. If you can do that, you're going to win the AdMech game. 3 more armies and we're done, everyone. Imperial Guard. Guys, against Imperial Guard, it's similar to playing Death Guard. Control that freaking board. If you can get to them and overwhelm them and just put a line of bodies, they won't leave their deployment zone until round 4, at which point you've won the game. Keep them locked in that deployment zone. You'll deny their primary. They're going to kill you. Imperial Guard's job is to kill people. You won't survive them. That's okay. If you can max your primary and you deny them primary until they kill you, you've won the game on points. Then we've got 2 more Imperial Knights. I think Imperial Knights are really cool. Unfortunately, they are the second worst army in the game right now. They are, however, quite similar to Chaos Knights. So you just have to kill them. You can't contest primary against them. I honestly wouldn't even bother. Fixed secondaries, you're basically always going to be taking bring it down and deploy or something like that. So just focus on killing this army and you'll be okay. Don't be cute with them. If you're cute, that's how you give them the opportunity to make something happen. And then lastly, one of my favorite armies in the game, but probably the worst army in the game right now. I don't know. Imperial Knights are making it a serious pitch for it. We have the Custodes. I think Custodes will be in a much better place in about a month when the data slate is dropped. But for right now, here's the way that you need to beat the Custodes. You want to max your secondaries, and you want to prevent Custodes from denying your primary. Because Custodes' only way of winning right now is to hold primary and deny your primary. So if you don't even have to take primary away from them, if you can just score some primary and get all your secondaries, you're going to win the game. It is that simple. As far as gameplay specific things, you want to force them into the open if they want to charge you. Don't let them charge you from behind walls, because that's just where they want to be. They want to be not shot with any of your flat damage 3, and that's their entire game. You want to force them out into the open to charge you, or you want to force them to charge your useless chaff like Kroot Hounds, Gretchen, things like that. And then their charges are worthless, and you just overwhelm them. That is the secret to Custodes. Guys, if you follow all of these, you're going to have much more successful games. I highly encourage all of you to actually, at the beginning of every single match that you play, write down what you have to do to win this game. A lot of people complain to me. They're like, yeah, every time I charge these monsters or I charge whatever, he then gets behind me and I end up just not getting the points and I lose. Every time that happens, one of the big problems is you have not identified your path to victory. Identify your path to victory and execute on that game plan. You're going to have much more success in Warhammer. If you like this advice, please leave me a comment down below saying this was useful for you. I have spoken a lot, and I've got a father who's looking at me over my shoulder. One thing I've learned, everybody, is that you're never too old to go do yard work in your parents' yard. So I'm going to go dig some holes in the back porch, or not in the back porch, but in the backyard right now, and that's going to be great. And I hope all of you love this video. If I don't get another one out, Merry Christmas to you all, or whatever holiday you celebrate. I hope you have a wonderful one, and I hope you are spending it with people that you love. Until next time, happy crumping, everybody. Bye-bye.